Welcome to the week one, module one of the, this is the lecture aspect of it. So this lecture, we'll talk about JavaScript, alerts, variables, strings. Don't talk about the numbers that much, expressions, and source code repository. So what is JavaScript? So in a nutshell, it's an object-oriented programming language. It enhances interactive effects within a web browser. So it's one of many different programming languages. It's an older language that's been out for quite some time. It's what makes your website experience a nice experience. So if you go back to, for example, I'm going to use the Wayback Machine. The Wayback Machine is a good thing. I gotta Google it though. Wayback Machine is a archive system that archives websites from way back when. So for example, if I went to CNN.com, and I use that one because I know it has a lot of stuff on it, so I could go back to a previous state of mind when it's older. So once it loads up here, let's go back to an earlier time when we know that internet sucked. So let's go to 2000. It should be pretty good, even though JavaScript was around in 2000, but let's choose June 21st. Okay, so that snapshot doesn't exist. All right, let's try a different one. Let's try NBC. That should be a good one, because I know they go back far. This is what I was hoping to get, something really old. Let's see if they have 1996. So you gotta remember, the internet back then was very new. Internet service was new at this time, so websites were not that nice. I mean, they did what they can do. If it does load up here. All right, so it's perfect. This is perfect. You see that they're using a marquee which waves across the screen. You see what I'm saying? Now it kind of went away. Let's see if I go to April 25th. So as you see here, we're using something called a marquee, which is not the most popular thing. But all right, so we get to April 1st, 2005. Okay, you see how the website was set up. It has some things. This right here is not even JavaScript. It's just, well, at the time it was JavaScript. There's a hover over. But as you can see, the page is not that nice. It's just a bunch of image blocks, so it's all it is I don't know if I'll show you the view source, but all it is a block of code. It has a bunch of different blocks, and you know, that's what they had. I mean, JavaScript was available, but it wasn't used like it is now. So for example, let's go to NBC.com now and see how more interactive it is. So if I go to NBC.com now, you see how nice and interactive it is. Talk about the game that's happening here in an hour. That's why I'm making this video, so I can watch the game, watch us probably lose to the Browns. Hopefully I'm wrong, but you know. Anyways, you see how more interactive it is. It's more into it, and that's because it more likely, if you go right click and do, oh geez, why is it not coming up? You could do, well, you could do view page source, and that'll show you all the code, and I'm sure that everyone here could understand what that does. But no, honestly, you see it's just JavaScript, so it makes it more interactive. So we'll talk about that when we get to the lab aspect of it. But anyways, I wanted to show you a little example of that. So example of no JavaScript. So this is a problem. So for example, you know, you go to fill out some information and you click send message or whatever. So there's no JavaScript on this page. I have clicked on the send message, but do not know it's working. So what this means is, let's say that I go and click the submit button and it doesn't work, but I don't get any message that says, hey Jeff, it didn't work, or there was a problem. How am I gonna know there was a problem? I'll just assume it worked or it didn't work, whatever the case is. By having JavaScript enabled, you could pop up a message to say, hey, you know what, you forgot to input your email address, or the email address you used, we traced it and it doesn't work. You know, stuff like that. You can add all this information by JavaScript, because JavaScript happens on the window itself. Okay. Moving on. Website with JavaScript. Look at that right there. I forgot to put my email address in. I forgot to and our subject. These are things that we will learn this semester. At the end of this semester, when you finish, you'll know how to do this, and you'll make your life easier. Lesson 1 is alerts. Oops. Lesson 1 is alerts. So what is alert? It's something that pops up on your screen, and we'll show you how that works. It's not that fancy. It's not going to blow you out of water, but it is something that we'll learn how to do as a pop-up box. Now you see how this is set up. It's pretty straightforward. So alert is actually a function. So that's a predefined function within JavaScript. So we just type in the word alert, and part of the why we're using parentheses is it allows us to enter something called, you'll hear it two different ways. You'll hear it with two different flavors. One flavor is called an argument. The other flavor is called a parameter. What do they mean? They both basically mean the same thing, but what we're doing is providing a value to that program. So that function alert allows you to input one parameter. And the idea of that is to pop it up on the screen, whatever value you put in here. Now you notice here, we have quotation marks, and we have a value in here, which this is the Steelers came up short. So let's hope that today they don't come up short, but you know, I don't have much faith in them. If they were 16-0, I'd say it's a shoo-in. Anyways, that's called a literal string. And then at the end here with the semicolon, that ends it. So JavaScript has three kinds of pop-up boxes: alert, confirm, and prompt. This one right here is the alert box. Variables. So what is a variable? Okay. And this goes across all languages, not just JavaScript. It's containers that store data. So variables are named containers that you can place data in that refer to data being named containers. So for example, you can have a variable called vehicle, and what types of vehicles could be in there? You could have a Toyota, you could have a Ford, you have a Chrysler, you could have a Mercedes, you could have a BMW, you could have a Tesla, etc. It goes all down the board. What type of make is it? It's a 4Runner, it's a Tundra, it's a Camry, it's a Ranger, it's a etc. It goes on. And then what type of model? Well, okay, it's a Z24, it's a XYZ47, whatever. You get my point. Each area holds some type of data value specific to its field. A variable can be named anything you want it to be, and it can hold anything you want it to be. So when we have when you declare a variable, you have to declare it as a VAR, which stands for variable. You give it the name of the variable equals the value with ticks like this. That's a literal string, and that's how it equals. But there are keywords that you can and can't use. Remember that. So these are keywords that you can't use. So, well, you can use like var, but you can't type in import vehicle. That won't work. You can't type in if vehicle equals truck. Later on, we'll talk about that, but not right now. So var vehicle equals truck. That's the variable name. That's what it equals. That executes the statement. So variable name will have invalid and valid. So invalid is if I use a number like the second vehicle equals car, that starts with a number, so that's invalid. You can't start a variable. You can't give a variable name the same name as the function that you're using, such as var, that won't work. And you also can't have spaces. Everything has to be joined together, or you have to have an underscore. Valid would be var1 equals Merlot. It's one word. We talked about that. It could start with upper or lowercase. We could even put a $ in front of it. I wouldn't recommend it, but let's say that we did, it would be acceptable. We could put underscore city like this, because it's not a space, and it's fine. So now we have something called camel toes. Oh my God, camel case. So we have college credit per course. You notice how that equals 4. It's all lowercase, so it's bad practice. You don't want to keep everything the same. It's kind of hard to read. And then if you make it uppercase, it's shouting at you, it's still bad practice. Okay, so it doesn't work out. Good practice is this: start at lowercase. That's why it's called a camel case. Lower, see how it goes to high, and then high and high. So it's how a camel goes. So you start with the lowercase, and then you do at the end of each new or beginning of a new word, you do an uppercase and so forth. So that's how the camel starts off. Boom, boom, boom. Best practice. That's how you declare your variables. Meaningful names. Don't use XYZ. You know what XYZ stands for, but trust me, the next person who comes into that job, he or she's not going to know what that means. You want to give it some type of name, like giraffe age. As soon as you see that, you're like, I know what the variable is. Because it's a giraffe. It's his or her age. Assignment operators, that's the equals. So var vehicle equals, you're telling it what it does. Var vehicle, if we have it like this is undefined. It doesn't provide a value. Whereas if it does this, then it does provide a value. JavaScript is an unscripted dynamic language. So examples of code is right here. Types of different data types. So one thing you'll learn about JavaScript is you don't have to declare data types. Where other languages, such as basic SQL, which you had to do within, before you got here within database, you had to describe if it was what type of data type it was, whether it was an integer, whether it was a varchar, and so forth. Other popular programming languages are like Java, not related to JavaScript, ASP.NET. You have to declare the variables in those languages, but like PHP, you don't have to. So it just is Python, you don't have to. It just depends. Lesson 3, let's talk about strings. Strings are a data type. Let me make sure we're learning this week so I don't mess this up. Boom, boom, and boom. Values, expressions, and variables. And I think there's a week that we're learning numbers too. Okay, that's okay. We could. Yeah, this is fine because this is different. All right, so strings or data types used to represent text are wrapped in either single or double quotes. So your primitive data type, string, number, boolean. We'll talk about that later, but we've already talked about strings. Var JavaScript example, varsity equals Seattle. So you notice how I have that single ticks here. You could do that. That works out fine. This right here works fine too. So you could either use a single tick or a double quotation mark. The outcome is the same. Choose one approach that will be consistent with your team. Either ways will work, but come up with a single compared to multiple ways. So don't have this in line 47 and have this in line 56. Make sure your stuff is the same across the board. That's very important. All right, where am I at? All right, so error message right here. You notice how I start off with a single tick and then I do a double quotation mark? That won't work. Do not mix a single and a double quotes together because this will fail. Quotes, var response equals, it's great to see you again. Error message. This guy's losing his crap right now. He's lost his egg, I guess. So as you see here, you have a single tick. You have a single tick. Now, this hypothetically could work, but here's the problem. We have another tick in here, and guess what happens? The program thinks that it ends right there, and it's looking for, hey, where's the semicolon? I don't know how to execute it, and it blows up. So be careful when it comes to that. Now this right here, you see how I have it? I used a double quote. By using the double quote instead of the single quote, it allows me to put that single tick in here without a problem. It doesn't complain about it. It's like, hey, I like that. And this guy's all excited because it worked. And why shouldn't he be excited? Alrighty, moving on. Length property. This is a good one. Var response, it's great to see you again. So you know how, like, for example, on Twitter, when you type in, you have so many characters that you could type in, and now they have it limited to more characters. Well, they could do something like this, especially on the web browser itself. They could type in a value. So like when you go to type in your stuff, they have a variable declared for this, which is a dynamic variable, and their variable might be your name. So for example, let's say my name is the wine guy. It'll be like var wine guy equals, and then whatever I type in. And then they have this, and I have this spelled wrong, by the way. This should be response. I just noticed that. So it would be the name of the variable. So mine would be one guy, and we'll talk about this when we do the lab, dot length, and it'll capture what that length of that value is. So that's also important because let's say the max is 255. I don't know what it is offhand, but then it would provide whatever that value is, and provide like, hey, you know what, he went over, he didn't go over, or whatever the case is. It would provide that information. So that is important to have. Alrighty, moving on. This is a built-in method to uppercase and lowercase. So this is not a method or a function. So for example, if I start off as var response, I live in Pittsburgh, response, I live in Pittsburgh, we could turn it into an uppercase and lowercase. We'll walk through this in our assignment and our exercise as well. Dry, if you ever heard the word dry, it doesn't mean that you're dry, it means don't repeat yourself. So don't use the same source code all throughout the land. Use it one time versus multiple times. And we'll talk about that later as we learn more. Once we learn about functions, it needs to follow the best practice method or naming functions. So you have your function right here. You give it some type of name. You have your what's going on here. Your brackets represent a parameter and optional. You have your body of the function. You have your invoke the function down here, and when you invoke it to work, and we'll walk through that in the lab how that works. You have your function here, first name, last name, good evening, and we'll talk about how this all works. But what we're doing here is consolidating subject lines to equal one thing, and then we have our output. So we kind of went through this one quick, but we'll go through it nice and slow when we do the lab. Lesson 4 is expressions. Expressions are like var score variable, and you take two values and add them together like this. So you have 45 plus 32, and it provides you what your score is. So we'll talk about how to do this in the lab as well. Pretty straightforward stuff. Let's say that you develop a game. Every time you score a point, how does it add the source code? So it uses something called two different ways. You could do the variable name plus plus, which automatically does an auto incrementer of 1, or you could take the variable equals variable plus 1, which does the same thing. I prefer this one right here because it's less code and it's more quicker. Or you can do this. Remember, the score has to be declared and assign a value, which is a lot more work. Eliminate ambiguous. Dude, is one of those tongue twisters for me. Oops. So you want to eliminate doing things the wrong way. So var score, 1 plus 3 times 4, not the right way. You won't get the right answer, but if you do it this way, where you say var score equals 1 plus, and then in parentheses you put your expression, then you get, okay, that's 12, that's 13 right there. But if you did 1 plus 3 is 4, times 4 you get 16, so it's not the right answer. This right here is the right way of doing it. Lesson 5 is get, and actually, you know what, I am going to, yeah, that is get. We'll talk about get this week as well. So it's a version control system for tracking changes in the computer files. Learn the basics. Go to YouTube channel, go to my homepage, click on the link YouTube, and then source code repository. Yeah, we'll actually, so how that works is what I'm talking about. Is if you go to my page down here, I have a YouTube channel here, which takes you out to my channel, and it tells you to go to source code repository and pause that. There's my video. Every time it gets me on a crazy caption. Always look like an idiot. Anyways, playlist, go to source code repository. I think I have it there. Yeah, source code repository right here. Oops, I'm gonna pause this. This will walk you through 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll take you through terminal basic code. We're using command line language. If you're using if you're using a Mac, you use terminal to do it like this. If you're using a PC, you use something else. we'll walk through that in a lab, how to set all this up, so don't worry about that now. Alrighty, and let's see what else. That's it. So that's our lecture for today. Any questions, reach out to me through Element. But for the most part, it's a lecture for this week, and then a lab will be different. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good day. Bye.